We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including all kinds of NHL trade talk around a variety of teams, including the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Vancouver Canucks. Are we going to be getting close to a conversation around Quinn Hughes and his future, which could lead to a trade before the end of this season? We'll discuss the latest intel from Elliotte Friedman on the Hughes situation. Plus, we have talk around the Nashville Predators, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Canucks and the Leafs. Plus, we have news from the NHL waiver wire and a bunch of other injury and recall notices around as well coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss in today's video. Before we jump into today's news and all of the topics we want to discuss, I just want to take a quick moment and wish all of our American friends and followers a very happy Thanksgiving. I know it's a huge holiday down in the U.S. All kinds of great celebrations going on. I'm sure lots of great food, time with family, etc. So I hope you're all having a great holiday. Obviously, because of the holiday, it is a quiet day in the NHL with no scheduled NHL games, and a little bit later on some of the news side. Lots of speculation around trades and whatnot, but not as much from the news front. Tomorrow will be a busy day, and of course, Thanksgiving in the U.S. does kind of extend until the Friday after. Obviously on Thursday, and then the Friday after. There's lots of stuff going on through the day. So NHL action gets underway pretty early tomorrow, and there's all kinds of games staggered throughout the entire day. So will be a big day of NHL hockey, and I would imagine there'll be a lot more newsworthy stuff coming out tomorrow. But we did get activity on the NHL waiver wire here today. We had the Toronto Maple Leafs had Sammy Blais on waivers, and I did do a video on this earlier in case you missed it, but just to quickly recap, the Montreal Canadiens did reclaim Sammy Blais. Of course, he was originally signed by the Habs before the season started, ended up on waivers. Toronto picked him up. He played 8 games, and because the Montreal Canadiens were able to put in a claim to get him back, they were able to assign him directly to their AHL affiliate. And of course, right now, the Habs are on the road. They played in Utah last night, and they have a very tough back-to-back situation coming up between Vegas and Colorado over Friday, Saturday. So that's certainly going to be a really, really tough outing. I believe the Marty St. Louis already confirmed that Montembeault will get the start against the Golden Knights, and Dobush will play against the Avalanche. And the Avalanche only have one regulation loss all season so far. They look like an absolute juggernaut, and of course the Golden Knights just got Mark Stone back, and they are a pretty solid team as well. So they have some tough games coming up, but because they're on the road, it just made more sense for them to send Blais down to the Laval team in the American Hockey League. There is an expectation that when they get back home that he's likely going to be recalled, and of course it'll depend on their injury situation and everything at the time as well. But because of the fact that he was originally with them and put on waivers, and he can go right down to the AHL. And the other part of that as well that had to happen was that no other teams tried to claim him besides Montreal, which was also the case here today. So nothing new else on waivers here for today as well. So that was all for that. A bunch of other recalls, roster moves, injuries, all that kind of stuff, updates around players. The Utah Mammoth have recalled Kevin Rooney. They've also had to place Olli Mata, defenseman, on injured reserve, so he'll be missing some time. The Minnesota Wild recalled Nicholas Aube-Kubel. Now he's, I guess you could call him a pretty decent veteran, more of a depth player, but at times has gotten out a fair bit of NHL games. I believe he's up around 300 games for his career. The expectation is that he will be making his Minnesota Wild debut here in the coming days, so look for that. The Edmonton Oilers had a practice this morning, and Kasperi Kapanen, who looked to be getting very close to returning, and the return was pretty imminent from what I understand, left practice, very mad. Looks like something else happened. I'm not sure if it's a re-injuring of what he was dealing with or something new, but either way, you could tell he was very frustrated and ticked off and left the ice. Made a big scene. Anyway, so clearly something has been aggravated injury-wise for him, which is likely going to keep him out longer. So that'll be a situation worth monitoring. We didn't get more of an update beyond the fact of the cameras caught him leaving the ice frustrated. We did get confirmation as well that Brady Tkachuk of the Ottawa Senators will definitely be returning tomorrow in his hometown against the St. Louis Blues. It was previously somewhat speculated, and when his podcast, which comes out every Wednesday now with him and Matthew, he did mention that was what they were targeting, and the team, and he did confirm today that it's now a done deal. It's good to go. Brady will be in the lineup tomorrow. Of course, St. Louis is his hometown, so he said if he can't return at home in Ottawa, it's probably the next best thing. They were having the full player roster, all the team, over to the Tkachuk homestead today for Thanksgiving dinner as well. So that should have been a great team function. The Toronto Maple Leafs, of course, they held a skate today as well. Looks like Dakota Joshua will be getting back into the lineup after a healthy scratch in their next game, of course, on Friday. But it does look as though Matthias Michelli, who was also a healthy scratch in that game against the Blue Jackets, will not be getting back in just yet. So he'll have to wait a little bit longer to find his term based on line rushes and everything. Speculation is, and it does look like Max Domi will next be the one to sit and be healthy scratched as well. Craig Berube did make a comment saying that when he's moving his feet and playing hard, he can be impactful, but he's been too inconsistent here as of late. So it looks like a message is going to be sent in that regard to hopefully wake him up. So we'll see what happens in their next game here. But of course, the Leafs did pick up a win against Columbus. It was I'm not sure if it's a game they're going to be completely love and be thrilled with, but they did find a way, and they got to 2 points. It was a scoreless game for a large chunk of it. The Blue Jackets did take a 1-0 lead towards the latter part of the third. The Leafs did manage to respond on a goal from Easton Cowan to tie it up late, and then they won it in overtime. So they didn't get much in the way of goals. They got a couple at the end just to squeak it out. But sometimes when you're in a funk and you're trying to get your season back on the rails, sometimes it doesn't really matter how you do it, just that you do. It builds the confidence, get everybody feeling better about themselves, end of the skid, and then I guess we'll see where things go here with Toronto from there. But obviously, definitely need to get some better play going if they're going to sustain that type of level of playing, get some more wins here to try to climb their way back out of the hole in the standings. And even though they're pretty low in the standings, it's still a tight division race. You look at the top where you've got the Lightning, who have been red hot, followed by, like the Senators, and then you got Boston, Detroit, Montreal, all kind of clumped together there. And but there's really not a huge gap. I think there's a difference of 5 points would take the Leafs from 6th or 7th all the way up to 2nd, 3rd area. So it's not that big. So a bit of a streak, and it can be right back in. Now, staying with the Leafs, we'll get into some of the trade talk. We'll start with them. A bunch of different updates here from a variety of insiders. We'll start with what Dave Pagnotta was talking about today. He appeared on Daily Faceoff's morning program, Morning Cup of Coffee, with Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohen. He was talking about some of the players that in the Leaf roster that he believes to be available that could, we know that the Leafs are definitely looking to shake things up. Haven't had a good season, as we've stated so far. I'm assuming Brad Treliving is going to try to remain patient here, but as much as, it's possible they get things turned around here soon, I still think they've seen enough of a lot of guys to know that there's some missing pieces. So he says that Max Domi is definitely available. Now, of course, after signing an extension not too long ago, when you're not playing well and you have term and money on your contract, it can be challenging to move. But it sure sounds like the Leafs would be willing to move Max if they're able to, and if the right deal comes along. He also made mention that Morgan Rielly's name has been getting a lot of extra attention as you talk to different league executives and hear the different speculation about what the Leafs are up to. Rielly's name is definitely out there. Now, of course, the fact that he has trade protection and can block a deal certainly complicates things, so it does make it less likely that Rielly would be moved. But, of course, in the right scenario, I'm not sure what it would take for them to go to him and see if he'll waive or whatnot, but certainly a name that the team is definitely willing to entertain it. That much we can say, but, of course, when you give a player control like that, it certainly changes the dynamic. So it doesn't mean it's going to happen, doesn't mean they're going to get to the point to even ask him to waive, but his name has been out there for sure. Brandon Carlo still very much out there as well. We've heard a couple of scenarios here in the recent weeks that the Leafs even entertained trading him in the offseason. They were in on J.J. Peterka. He was one of the names mentioned, and they kind of shifted their focus from Peterka to Bo Byram in Buffalo. And he was also on the table for that deal. The Sabres never accepted any offers, so they never got to the point where they were in agreement on anything, so nothing ever happened, but there was definitely conversations around that for sure. And just to go a step further with that as well, Chris Johnson on his program, another NHL insider with TSN and The Athletic, says basically that the Leafs are having a lot of different talks around a variety of trades. I think they see some needs in multiple areas. Of course, on the blue line, I think scoring up front, another centerman would be good. Like, there's a lot of things that they're looking at that, of course, it's going to be tough to do it all, but they're certainly analyzing a bunch of needs. And he said, basically, if you're not, one of their core members, they're not looking to trade a star core player, whether it be, Matthews, Nylander, probably Tavares, Matthew Nyes would probably be about the only four, basically, that would be some players that they don't really want to entertain moving. I think we can probably throw in, guys like Easton Cowan, Ben Danford into that as well. They don't have a lot of promising young players, so they want to keep the few that they do have to see how things work out with them a little bit longer before they decide to pull the trigger on a trade. But yeah, if you're not a core piece in Toronto, it sounds like they're definitely available in the right scenario. Whether you're looking at Domi or even guys like, Joshua or Michelli that haven't worked out, you have to think as well, maybe even a Scott Lawton. That deal hasn't worked out the best, but maybe some of that might be deployment as well and where he's been hurt to some extent. I'm not saying that they're looking to move Lawton or like a Nick Waugh. I don't think they're, super down on those guys, but if for the right price, right deal, right player that's going to be impactful, I think they would consider just about a variety of anything. Well, one player that we did hear about, according to Pagnotta, that they definitely appear to be somewhat high on, and at this point we don't even know 100% that he's going to be moved, but it would be Blue Jackets captain Boone Jenner, who they've just had a couple of battles with. Of course, they've played the Blue Jackets here a couple times recently. They've played Jenner, of course, a lot over the years, but Boone Jenner's a guy that, he can play up and down your lineup. He's a good leader, has some grit to him, has some goal-scoring ability, and he's a player that right now is looking for an extension with Columbus, and for the most part, from everything we've heard of the organization, really since Don Waddell arrived as GM, all indications were that they had intentions of keeping Jenner. Like, I know his name was popping up a lot last year, mainly because other teams were interested in him, so they're getting a lot of calls. Waddell completely downplayed it and said, no, we're not really interested in moving him. And when he comes up for extension, we want to extend him. Like, we really like him as a player, as a leader. Not only do I not want to trade him, I want to extend him, keep him longer. Well, they've yet to get that done. So because it's not done, it's kind of fueled other teams to kind of continue checking on this player. And like I said, until he's signed, that's probably going to continue to happen. Now, we haven't heard much in the way of why things haven't worked out with an extension. But at this point, like I said, it's not done, and he's definitely getting attention again. So we'll see if the Leafs or any other team can pull off a trade for him. But they have a lot of things they're considering. It's not going to be easy, of course, and I'm not sure we're going to see anything too significant for a little bit. But I think as we get closer here in the next few weeks, before the Christmas break, there's going to be a little bit of a urgency, I think, for some teams to get some stuff done, and then of course you're going to, after that, be going into the Olympic break, which is before the trade deadline. So there's a couple of kind of key spots in the schedule where you're going to see a little bit more, I think, rising urgency amongst teams to try to find some of their business to get done here. We'll see where things go, but we'll talk about the Predators next year. Frank Saravalli is reporting that many of the veterans in Nashville that have been rumored to be on the move are at a point where they're ready to make that happen. Whether you're talking about Stamkos or you're talking about Jonathan Marchessault, Ryan O'Reilly, that basically, according to Frank, he says it's been a very toxic environment. They're obviously, the losing's getting to them. They're tired of it not working out, and that many of them are ready to move on. Now, we've seen some insiders say as well, when it comes to the Predators, that at this point at least, it's not convincing that they're willing to retain money on some of those contracts, so trading them might be a little more complicated. But if Barry Trotz doesn't want to retain money and he's going to have a really high asking price, it's going to be tough to move those guys along. I mean, at some point, maybe you have to look at it and be like, we want cap savings to do other things to be our kind of big reward, even if the return isn't huge. But they're all guys getting attention from around the league. The belief is with Stamkos is that he needs a better playmaker to play with to kind of feed him the puck, to have more opportunity to score. When it comes to Marchessault and O'Reilly, of course, again, different scenario. New team could hopefully rejuvenate them. The Montreal Canadiens have been a team that we've heard linked to various degrees around all three of those players. Now, they're not going to get all three. I'm not what I'm saying, but we've heard at different points in the last couple of months, especially, really more so in the last month, around all three of them, that there's some degree of interest around all of them. I would have to think that O'Reilly's probably at the top of the list because I think they would prefer a centerman. Stamkos at this stage of his career is more of a winger. I do wonder if they did make a play for a guy like Stamkos, would they consider moving Laine? Because I do wonder what his future holds, and if, is he a player? Because that would help the money aspect, especially if Nashville doesn't want to retain. That's just my speculation. I don't have any reason to suggest that that's being discussed right now, but you have to think it's possible. But like I said, all three of those players, according to Sarah Valley, are ready to go and willing to accept trades, in contending situations. Whether or not Montreal's one of them, I don't know. But the Nashville Predators have also been heavily scouting the Canadiens at a variety of their games. They've had a lot of their staff and scouting and AGMs, etc., popping up at Habs games a lot, which leads us to think that they're definitely having or have had or some degree of conversation. So doesn't mean anything's going to definitely work out and get done. But like I said, all three of those guys in the mix for sure. Now, when it comes to guys like Roman Josi or Philip Forsberg, I do think it's possible, or even UC Saros to some degree, that those guys could get moved, but I think those are more likely, if there was a chance of that happening, more likely for the offseason, but we'll have to see. Things could get wild there. I mean, right now, publicly, at least Barry Trotz has been pretty adamant in denying a lot of the rumors around the team, so we'll see where things go. Now, when it comes to Vancouver, Elliot Friedman and his latest reporting is wondering at what point are they going to talk to Quinn Hughes? We've had the reports just a few days ago that they're willing to look at and talk about a lot of their veteran guys, that they've kind of notified the league that they're kind of hanging up the for sale sign on some players. And I think Kiefer Sherwood is right at the top of that list. A veteran guy who's, had a good season last year. He's having another one this year. There's definitely a good amount of interest in him, a guy who can play with grit, score some goals, play in your middle six. I think Sherwood would generate a half-decent return. But, how deep they're willing to go right now beyond that, you're probably looking at mostly players on expiring contracts. But as Elliot said, he would have thought prior to the season that we would have made it to at least the Olympic break, and it would have been after the Olympics when the Canucks, if things weren't going well, had to sit down conversation with Quinn Hughes saying, okay, we need to discuss your future, because if you're not going to re-sign, we really need to consider a trade so that we get some assets back. Now, Elliot's being told, he says that conversation could be happening much sooner. Could it be Christmas break instead of Olympic break even? That's it seems like things are kind of moving a little bit quicker and rapidly in Vancouver because of the down season. So, at what point are we going to see something happen? It really makes me wonder. I know most people are under the impression that Quinn Hughes won't be in Vancouver too much longer, at least past his contract at least. They're not going to let him walk for nothing. A lot of people have been mentioning the Philadelphia Flyers about a landing spot for him. Now, everybody understands and I think agrees that he probably wants to play with his brothers. But are the Devils going to be prepared to make a big trade for him? I mean, I don't know. I think they were probably hoping he would just kind of fall in their lap as a free agent. If he wants to go there, that would probably be the strategy. Now, of course, he's got this year and another year left on his contract, and he doesn't have trade protection, so they could move him anywhere for a decent return. But Philly, does it make sense for Philly to do that if they can't keep him beyond the second season? I really don't think it does. I don't think they're anywhere near contending. Would he make them better? Absolutely. He'd make any team better, for sure. But, are they going to give up some big assets? Whether it be an Owen Tippett or a Matvei Minchkov, or they're going to have to give up something substantial for Vancouver to pull the trigger on that kind of deal. And does it make sense for them to do that for a season and a half of Quinn Hughes, and then he walks to their rival just short distance away with the New Jersey Devils? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I know there's been a lot of chatter around Philly, but I don't see it myself. But we'll see. Obviously the Devils are the main team that a lot of people think he will end up with. Now, if there's a team that's a contender and they're close, and I think adding Quinn Hughes gets them to be a more serious cup contender, and they're willing to pay a big price for this year and next year, that's different. I just don't think Philadelphia is there. Of course, there is the Rick Tocchet connection that we know. He had a good relationship with his former head coach, really liked working with him, and obviously there's some other players and guys he's friends with as well, like Zegras, etc., that might make things appealing in Philly for the short term. But if his ultimate goal is to play with his brothers, I just don't see how that makes a lot of sense for them. So we'll have to wait and see where things go. But it sounds like the conversation between Vancouver and Quinn Hughes is coming soon. Now, I seen Pierre LeBrun of TSN. He said that he thought the Quinn Hughes stuff might be more likely to be in the summer. But we've seen enough reporting earlier saying that the Canucks feel like his value is much higher to do it this season if he's not going to stay, because then a team that acquires him gets 2 cracks at playoffs and a Stanley Cup with him on the roster instead of 1. And then they can maybe get better assets back because he'll be with them longer. So, again, we'll have to wait and see where things go. But there's certainly a lot of teams, especially the Canadian teams, are certainly down on their luck this year, not having good seasons. So that generates a lot of speculation. I know the Oilers are another one. We've seen Edmonton about, when it comes to the goaltending. I know Elliot was saying today that when it comes to Edmonton, that the Tristan Jarry rumors, they're definitely interested, I think, to some degree, and he does make sense to some degree. The cap hit's a little higher on his contract, so it's a little bit more complicated for them to make it work. But the other thing that he said is that the reason why they never pulled the trigger on a John Gibson deal, because there was a lot of speculation in the last 1 or 2 years that Gibson was willing to be traded to Edmonton out of Anaheim before he went to Detroit. Never happened, and I think Edmonton seemed to have cold feet as much as they liked the goalie, but his injury history kind of scares them off. And they're concerned right now. Say what you want about Pickard and Skinner and their inconsistent play, but they're always available. They don't have to worry. They've been pretty healthy and consistent that way. So if they move Skinner, who's still young, and if he figures things out on another team and becomes a more consistent goalie, they might be kicking themselves. So it's hard to say, right? Like, look at, it happens enough times where younger players get moved and they go on and get things figured out. So ultimately, with Edmonton, Jarry's the same type of goalie, right? He does have some history with injuries, and that is a big concern. Yes, he's playing a lot better this year. He's got ties to the plays junior hockey there from Western Canada. There's a lot of things that might be optimal for both sides, but it's just that history that's concerning. So we'll have to see where things go. I mean, obviously, there's only so many goalies out there that can be available. Like, we've heard about Binnington as well. Binnington, for the most part, has been pretty healthy. We know that the Blues are possibly going to be retooling, and that it might not make sense for them to keep him around. They're also seeing some reports that Bowman's be concerned about dealing with the Blues because of the offer sheets, and they kind of got screwed over getting Holloway and Broberg. But I'm like, at the end of the day, you got to go after the players you think that you need to make your team better. And if the price is right, you do it. And if you don't, you don't. It's just that simple. It shouldn't matter about the history and what deals have gone down in the past. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, lots of things to monitor here as we go forward. Obviously, we know the math when it comes to teams out of the playoffs at U.S. Thanksgiving. If you're 4 points or more out of a playoff spot, the odds of getting back in are not as good, but we've seen it a little bit more here in the last couple of years, including the last 3 Cup finalists. The Oilers, the last 2 years, and even to go back 3 years, the Panthers, their first year in the finals before they won, all of them had slower starts to the year, were not in a playoff spot come Thanksgiving, and then worked their way back into it. The Habs last year, another example of that. Kind of climbed their way gradually throughout the year and into that wildcard spot that they clinched at the very end of the season. So it does happen. Usually about, out of the 8 teams that are in the playoff spots, at least 6 of them are typically going to stay there. And on average, sometimes 7. But we'll see what happens. Lots of hockey left to be played. And in some divisions, especially, the standings are very, very tight. So it's a little bit of a unique scenario this year as well. So we could even see that rule be a little bit less applicable, but only time will tell. Thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.